Welcome to the Healthy Relationships Initiative podcast. Our goal is to provide information and tools to help you build happier, healthier, and safer relationships of all kinds. To learn more about HRI, please visit www.guilfordhri.org and check us out on social media at GuilfordHRI.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's Healthy Relationships Initiative Relationships Booster. We're glad that you're here with us today. My name is Christine Murray, and I'm the director of the Healthy Relationships Initiative, as well as I direct the Center for Youth, Family, and Community Partnerships at UNC Greensboro. The Healthy Relationships Initiative is a partnership between UNC Greensboro and the Phillips Foundation, and our mission is to promote happy, healthy, and safe relationships of all kinds in Guilford County and beyond. We invite you to check out our website at guilfordhri.org to learn more and get connected to our online resources, as well as connect with us on social media at GuilfordHRI. Before we get started, for those of you joining us for the live program, you can submit questions to us at any time throughout the program. The best way to do that is to submit them to our moderator, Camila Dos Santos. And we do invite you to submit those questions. We'll take them as we can throughout the program, as well as toward the end of the program, and we'll leave time for that. And also, at the end of the program, we will share a feedback form, and so if you could take a moment to fill that out, that would be great. That helps us to know ways that we can continue to keep our programming strong, as well as ways that we can improve. We've got a great topic for today's program today. We know it's one that a lot of adults kind of struggle with, but they might be a little bit embarrassed to talk about, so we love to talk about those sort of topics. And our topic for today is making friends as an adult. And our guest expert today is Anna Keller. So Anna, thanks so much for being here with us. So glad to be here. And so if you could, just to start us off, tell us a little bit about your personal or professional background and what got you interested in the topic of making friends as an adult, or friendship in adulthood.
Sure, absolutely. So I am aware of lots of hats. So I tend to like to exist in that kind of world, but I'm a blogger. I write for a blog called Curiouser and Curiouser, and I am a writer by background. I went to school for journalism and kind of love stories and pulling people together through shared connection and things of that nature. So I think topics like these, friendships, relationships, things like that are always topics I find myself gravitating toward and find myself writing about both on my blog and then through other blogs like Triad Moms on Maine and things like that. So that's a little bit about me and in a way that's relevant to this topic here today.
Yeah, and that was how we first got connected with you, was through our partners at Triad Moms on Maine, and we work with them a lot. And so could you tell us a little bit, I know you wrote a blog recently on this topic, could you tell us a little bit about kind of what your main points about that for the Triad Moms on Maine blog were?
Yeah, so I've enjoyed partnering with them and writing posts about a variety of topics, and this is one that they asked me to touch on a few months ago, because to your point, I do think it is something that often we don't talk about, but a lot of people do wonder about and worry about and kind of struggle with. And so for that one was really rooted specifically in making friends as a parent, as a mother in particular, so a little bit more honed in than our topic today. But, you know, becoming a parent changes your life in a lot of ways. We were just having that conversation before we even started this chat. And so I think in that, like, your schedule is changing, your lifestyle is changing, and so people often find themselves in this different place where maybe friendships have changed a little bit too. And so looking for ways within this new landscape as a parent to kind of try to pull new friends into the mix too.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. And we, through the Healthy Relationships Initiative, have an ongoing partnership with Triad Moms on Maine too, where we take questions from readers about relationships and family life. And one of the things that's kind of surprised me through that series, which has been going on for, I think, over about a year and a half now, is a number of questions have come in related to friendships and adulthood. And I think when we first thought about this series, we were really thinking it would be more marriage or couple relationships, and then parenting, especially given that it was Triad Moms on Maine, kind of a parenting type of blog and family life blog. But we really heard that a lot of people had questions about their friendships and adulthood. And so just as a big picture starting point, what do you think it is about friendship and adulthood that's so difficult for people?
I think the adulthood piece is tricky, and it starts at whatever point you kind of leave school, right? So whether that's high school or college, those times in your life where you're kind of in lockstep with your peers and you're surrounded by people who are your same age and they're pursuing similar things. And so you can just look around and you're surrounded by these people you know. And friendships, not to say that there doesn't, that there aren't some challenges with friendship in childhood and adolescence, but I think the making friends part looks a lot different. And then you leave those places where you're just surrounded by these people who look like you, who are in a similar life stage, and you're not anymore. And so I think it's like you have to acquire this whole new skill set around making friends that you didn't have to have as a younger person, and that's a challenge. And then I think it continues to be a challenge because it doesn't stop there. Our lives continue to change as adults, and we go through these chapters and these phases, and our work lives change, and our home lives change, and our romantic relationships change. And so with all of those changes, that affects our friendships too.
Yeah,
and so I think that's kind of where it really starts.
I really agree with you, because I think that in a way, sometimes I think, not for everybody, but I think for a lot of people, you sort of kind of take the ease of making friendship in younger ages, or like when you're first starting college and everybody's in the same boat and at the same stage of life maybe, that it's easy. Everybody's looking for new friends. Everybody's kind of, there's a lot of good opportunities to connect. And then you get into adulthood in the real world, and let's say you might start at a job and think, oh, I'm going to make friends here, and then you get to your workplace and you're like, maybe not. Maybe these people aren't they're in different stages of life from me, or they don't have the same interests. So there's maybe not as many kind of natural environments. And then also, like you said too, I think that what adulthood means, and there's so many different phases and different directions that people can take in that phase of their life too. So it is difficult to not only make new friends, but also keeping those friendships and keeping them strong over time.
Absolutely.
And so what do you think? We're the Healthy Relationships Initiative, so we're really interested in healthy relationships of all kinds. And so when we're talking about friendship, what are some of your thoughts about what does it mean to have a healthy friendship?
I think the key thing around any relationship, whether you're talking about a friendship, a relationship between a parent and child, romantic relationship, whatever, I think communication is really at the center of those things. And especially when you do start to think about adult friendships and the ebb and flow of life that happens, I think that communication between friends becomes even more important. And then too, like an element of grace and understanding with one another. Like if you want to be in this with somebody for the long haul, for an adult friendship, and really just kind of keep it going throughout the course of many years, I do think that those things need to be present too, to acknowledge and understand the fact that our lives are going to change a little bit along the way, and they may not change in the same way or on the same timeline. And so there will be times where you might have to give a little bit more than the other person. There will be times when you need to lean on the other person a little bit more, and just being aware of those things. But then the communication piece too, like being willing to talk about things when you encounter conflicts with friends. And I think those moments can really define friendships and strengthen them in a big way, or you run the risk, if you don't do a good job of addressing those issues, of those maybe fizzling or weakening.
So in many ways, I think it is a lot of the same core relationship skills, like good communication and good problem solving. But I think that, like you said, because, it would be pretty rare, although I'm sure some lucky people have that, where they've got a friend, they both, their lives kind of take the same exact course. Just as one example, they graduate college at the same time, they get married or enter a relationship, start a new job around the same time, have kids at the same time, so they're kind of moving right at the same path. But we know that in the real world, that doesn't happen, and so life changes can happen at very different times for people. And so it's about, I like that word grace, of kind of being understanding that this person, that there might be some differences that we're going to have to navigate. I think one thing too that I was thinking about even before our program started today, just because I was thinking about this topic in general, that if you think about a marriage, there's a wedding, there's sort of like a formal legal even understanding of what does it mean to be in a marital relationship. Whereas a friendship, there's lots of different types of friendships, and there's not necessarily a formal commitment, or legal contract that friends make. And so in some ways you're kind of just building this thing that you kind of have shared understanding of what it means, but you might have different understandings even or expectations about what you bring to that. So do you have any thoughts on that?
I love that you said that because I was kind of going in a similar direction, which was you mentioned you kind of expected more questions to come around romantic relationships, around marriages and things like that. And I think the interesting thing is thank goodness, there are already a lot of resources around that topic. There's a lot of conversation around it. I feel like there are lots of great, you can listen to podcasts, you can watch talk shows, they address that issue. And so to your point, it's like people kind of, they have a little bit of a framework. Now, it may not be working in their home or in their relationship at a certain point, but I think most people kind of have a sense of the things that they should be doing to have a healthy marriage. And that same blueprint doesn't really exist with friendship on such a readily available level, right? I do think you have to do a little bit more digging. And also just kind of, a word that kept coming to mind as I was thinking about this topic is intentionality. It should bring some intentionality to those relationships because, yeah, otherwise they just kind of happen and they can emerge and they can not grow and they can kind of then falter. And so having some more intentionality toward it and deciding, like, this is something I do want to invest in. So what does that even look like?
Right. And I think that, we'll talk a little bit later about the idea of how to keep friendships strong over time. But even just, I think a lot of people do find it very intimidating just even think about, how do I make a friend? It sounds really basic, but it's hard. It might, just because something is basic, it doesn't mean that it's easy, right? So just the thought of how do I go out and make a friend when I'm an adult. So let's talk about that for a few minutes. So, let's say you are in a new phase of life, whether it is moving to a new town or starting a new job or becoming a parent or getting married or getting divorced or becoming an empty nester, like some major life change, and maybe you're finding like, wait a minute, the friends I have, or maybe I don't have any friends readily available at this stage of life. What are some kind of starting points that people can do when they find themselves, maybe entering a new phase of life and needing to start to build their friendship network?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it mimics in a lot of ways the things that you would want to do if you were trying to start dating again or for the first time or whatever. And so it's really about kind of putting yourself out there. But I think it's a really exciting opportunity too, because in putting yourself out there to make friends, you can also take that as an opportunity to do some personal growth and exploration. So like the example of moving to a new town, maybe you decide, well, you know what, this is a great opportunity for me to start that new style of workout that I've been meaning to, or take that photography class, or learn how to cook. And so you look for opportunities to plug into those things, and then you're putting yourself in these communities where you have the opportunity to potentially meet somebody who you might click with as a result. But you're also pursuing something that you were interested in too. So I don't think it has to be, you don't have to be like, oh, I'm driving myself out to this thing because I want to make friends. I think you should do things that you can do and enjoy, because then you're much more likely to meet like-minded people anyway.
Right.
So hopefully you get a lot of personal enjoyment out of it and meet people along the way too.
I think that's a great thought too, because I think for a lot of people too, to understand the other benefits that come along with trying new things or putting yourself in new situations, because it can be hard. You can say, oh, I'm going to go do the yoga class, or whatever it might be. And you go to the yoga class thinking, I'm going to make some new friends here. And then you get there and it's like, nope, your friend, a new friend is there waiting for you. And then maybe you try to go do a class of some sort, or you try to go do, join a new church or some other religious group or something like that. And it's hard to maybe feel, I think for a lot of people, they can really start to feel frustrated, like, I'm trying all these things, just like in the dating process too. Like, I'm glad you brought up that parallel, because I think there's a lot of similarities. But, it can be frustrating, but if you can really appreciate the fact that you're also growing, you're trying new things, this might be an opportunity for you to learn something else that you like to, that maybe as those frustrations come up along the way, if you're not immediately connecting with friends and some new thing that you try, that, gives another perspective to help keep pushing through maybe that frustration.
No, I think so too. And I also think it's important to remember, like, just because you go to that yoga class and you're like, well, nobody talked to me, so there are no friends here, it doesn't mean that necessarily that's the case. I think a lot of us, like, think about the things that you do that are so routine now. Maybe you've gone to that yoga class for 4 years.
Right.
And so you know the drill, you have a set group of friends there already, and so it doesn't come from any bad place, but you're not necessarily taking the time to look up and recognize that someone else is new there. So when you're the one who's decided, okay, I want to bring more or new friendships into my life for whatever reason, I do think that means some of the onus is on you to take that initiative and maybe start those conversations and not just wait for somebody else to do it.
That is true, because I think that is something that a lot of adults wish would happen, that somebody would just say, oh, you know what, Anna, she looks new here. I'm going to go up and introduce myself, and let's go get coffee after class this time or next time. And in reality, people who've been in situations like that, often they're just kind of there to do it. They're not necessarily, they may not be thinking about, oh, I would love to connect with a new friend right now. So, you know, in some ways needing to step out of your comfort zone. I think for a lot of people that's sort of uncomfortable. That's why a lot of people, actually, I remember one of the blog posts that I wrote for Triad Moms on Maine about this topic. It led to a very heated debate in the comments section, because some people were saying that they really felt like, you know, they wished that people weren't friendly. They weren't coming up and saying things to them. But then other people were kind of supporting the points that I had put in the piece, which are very similar to what you're just saying, is that sometimes you have to take that extra step, like reach out to somebody. But I think it's uncomfortable for people.
It's very uncomfortable. And, you know, so I read this book this past week, and it was funny because there were a lot of parallels to, well, like many facets of life, I think, especially for women. But it's this book called Brave, Not Perfect by Rashna Shaljani. And she talks about how, you know, like, listening to your anxiety and doing the opposite thing is a really brave thing to do. So if your anxiety is telling you, don't go to that dinner party, you're going to say stupid stuff all night. Go, right? Prove to yourself that you can go and that you can have great conversations. And like, so I kind of liked that idea, and thinking about those situations where it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know anybody in this class, I feel so uncomfortable. But just thinking, what can I do that would be brave in this instance? And maybe that brave thing is to set up your yoga mat next to somebody, and just try to strike up a conversation. And you don't know where that might lead. And it might be, you don't have too much in common, and it's kind of a dead end, but it might turn into a friendship. You just never know.
Right. And I think that in some ways even having that kind of realistic expectation that, like, it may take me 100 potential friends before I find, like, that one BFF that's going to be by my side forever, you know, versus, like, really thinking, like, oh, you know, well, I tried reaching out and it didn't work and they weren't friendly with me, or nobody has something in common. Because I think for a lot of people, it's hard. It's possible maybe to do that brave thing of stepping into that anxiety one time or a couple times, but it's hard. It gets harder and harder, I think, the longer that people have been doing it.
It does, and then it also doesn't, I think. So it gets harder if you're getting, like, if you're kind of hitting all these dead ends, but I do also think practice it, and so it feels less uncomfortable.
So there's a point probably you have to push that. This is interesting, because I'm thinking there's probably a point at which it's uncomfortable, and then you push past it, and you get to the point where you're saying, well, I'm just trying, and I'm getting practice, and, you know, it's been embarrassing or maybe a little bit uncomfortable reaching out and starting these conversations, but, you know, nothing really terrible happens, right? So it kind of helps you, but you probably have to kind of push past that, some of that resistance that can come up.
Absolutely.
Do you have any kind of practical thoughts or tips on, like, okay, so I've done the first brave thing, I've set up my yoga mat next to somebody, they're sitting there, I'm sitting there, you know, how do you just even strike up a new conversation? We like, and I should say, with these relationship boosters, we like to get really practical, because we know sometimes even just finding the right words in certain uncomfortable situations can be difficult.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Well, so let me start with this example. So I, like, an approach that I've adopted in recent years is, and this is less of the, I just saw you in yoga class, I don't know anything about you, but more like, maybe we've taken class together and exchanged enough information for me to know that we have things in common, or maybe we've worked together but haven't gotten super close, where I'll just say, hey, I really like you, and I think we have a lot in common. Would you want to hang out at some point? It's like asking you out on a date, basically, and saying, like, there are traits in you that I really like. I feel like they align with some of my traits, too. Would you like to take that a little bit further and see if there's any merit to this relationship? Kind of thing. But just being really straightforward. And even kind of, you can make light of it a little bit and saying, like, let's go on a fun date. I feel like we have a lot in common. So kind of making it, taking some of those, you're like, oh my gosh, the elephant in the room is, like, going to sound ridiculous, asking this person this, like, use that.
Yeah.
Say, I kind of feel ridiculous asking you this because it feels like I'm asking you on a date, but do you want to get coffee?
Yeah.
I would love to get to know you better, or something like that. And I found that tends to fall really well with people.
And I think too, when people do that sort of thing, other people actually appreciate it. Like it feels there's all this kind of, like you said, this awkwardness or this kind of discomfort around it, but how many of us would appreciate hearing that from somebody like, oh, I think you seem like a really neat person. I'd like to get to know you more.
Exactly.
But we often, it's uncomfortable taking that first step, but just trying to do that and just using really basic kind of direct communication. And even there, like just saying, concrete, like, let's go for coffee sometime. And maybe it'll turn into, again, your best friend, and maybe it'll just be, you know what, we had a nice conversation over coffee. That's not really going to, maybe after we got to know each other a little bit more, it's like we don't have as much in common, or it's not somebody that I want to invest as much energy into. The other thing that I would say, too, is, like, get specific. Because, I think it's common to be like, oh, we should get lunch sometime. Yeah, we should get lunch sometime. Like, if somebody ever says that, you need to say, like, or if you're extending that invitation, like, hey, do you have some, what would be a good day next week that we could get lunch, or 2 weeks from now, or how would that Thursday, work for you to get lunch? Because I think a lot of times people do that first, like, oh, yeah, I'd love to get coffee, or I'd love to get lunch, but they don't take that next step, and then it's an opportunity miss for more connection.
I totally agree with that. I think that's, and then so, right, and kind of like take that on and decide that you're going to be the one, okay, if I'm going to initiate the conversation, like, I'm also going to be the one to say, great, when does that work for you? Can you put it on the calendar for next week at some point? And then kind of doing that follow-through piece. So it doesn't just fizzle.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's really, really smart.
And how do you think social media plays into all of this? Like, because, I mean, obviously that is something that plays a big role. And in fact, many adults today, maybe not so much true for younger adults, but many adults today didn't grow up with that, so I think they struggle a lot with how to manage the kind of social media technology aspects of this whole starting friendship.
Yeah, I do think that's a helpful tool potentially, especially if you are in that phase where, right, again, where you're looking to make new friends. Like, there are so many great Facebook groups, I think, that exist. So it's, whether you're moving to a new town, and maybe you're a parent, and there's a great mom Facebook group that you can plug into, or maybe you're learning a new skill, and all of a sudden there's like a group you can plug into there. Using that as a tool to help identify other groups of people who might have things in common, and then that's you're kind of at an advantage there because you can watch the conversations that are happening.
Right.
And you can get a feel for, oh my gosh, I love what this woman posts. I just really like her perspective, or she seems funny, or whatever. And so you can do almost a little bit of vetting that way.
Yeah, because you could also find, like, I don't like what this person says. I don't like how they're talking to other people, that it can help you kind of bring out people, too.
Absolutely. And then kind of doing that same exchange, but it could be a virtual one where you say, hey, I totally share your views on this topic, or whatever it is, and would love to just connect a little bit more, and kind of doing that same thing. And then, but I do think an important thing with social media, I think it's a great tool. I think it's also a really great tool to keeping up with friends, which we can talk a little bit more about. But I do think you want to pull things out of social media as quickly as you can and make it a real face-to-face kind of thing.
Right.
So use it as a discovery tool initially, but don't, like, start a friendship on Facebook.
Yeah, don't rely on
that. If you live in the same town and you have the ability to spend time together in person, like, do that.
Yep, and even sometimes just even connecting in person, like, once or twice, may not move you to a really close friendship, but just kind of help move beyond just that initial sort of, like, social media piece. But I think I like what you said in the way that you described it as a tool, because I think it can be a good tool. It can be also a good tool for just building a closer friendship or getting to know people. So maybe you meet somebody out at that yoga class or wherever it is, or in some class or something that you're doing. And then, connecting on social media is a great way to get to know people more and start to kind of, like you said, kind of vet them a little bit more, learn a little bit about each other, and that can help foster that in-person relationship.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with that.
Do you think at all, like, are there any, what would be, this might seem like kind of a silly question. It's not on the list, so I apologize if it's not in the questions, but if you're exploring new friendships and trying to connect with some new people, first of all, I think that you need to be careful not to be, we never want to be approaching relationships from a place of being desperate, right? Because we might make bad choices in the people that we let into our inner circle. And that's true. We've done programs here on dating. That's true there, but it's also true, I think, in friendships. So can you think of maybe some kind of red flags or things that somebody should look out for that might say, you know, this should be somebody that I don't want to be mean to them, but maybe I don't want to let them really into my inner circle?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. That's a good one too, especially because even when we're in phases of our life where we're looking for new relationships, we want them to be good friendships, and we also only have so much time, right? So it's like we don't want to invest in these things that end up being not the right fit for whatever reason. So I think like maybe you're kind of in the early stages of getting to know someone, and I think it could be as easy as maybe you go out to a meal together and they don't treat the waitstaff kindly.
Right.
And so just like those little red flags, you're like, do I want to really invest in a person who doesn't seem to be kind to everybody? Or if they talk about past friendships or even a lot of relationships that have ended or ended badly, or just seem to be the kind of person that finds a lot of drama in relationships and things like that. For me, it's like that's not what I want my friendships to look like.
Right.
And so for me, those would be red flags for sure.
Yeah.
And just so kind of like doing a good job of listening to the way they talk about people and their lives and their background and things like that, and trying to get a sense of whether that feels like it kind of jives with what you're looking for or not.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. I think, you know, kind of relatedly too, it's like kind of, you don't want to keep a list of everything that everybody does for everybody in a relationship. I think especially when it comes to friendship, I know for me personally in my life, I've always felt like, you know, I really try to be careful about investing about the same amount that other people invest in me, you know, and that can change over time. So it's like if I know somebody's really going through a hard time, that they're going to need more of me, you know, than they can give to me at that time in that friendship capacity. And likewise, same thing, if I'm going through something, I'm thankful for friends who'll stand by even when I need more support than I'm able to give at that time. But I do think friendship especially, probably, you know, in many ways, more than a lot of other types of relationships, like they're really, to be healthy, you know, needs to be kind of a balance of give and take. And, you know, if it's always, you know, you're the person that's always reaching out to schedule time together, or you're the person that's always reaching out to just check in and see how you're noticing, well, that person's not really reciprocating. Not to say, again, that you wouldn't want to be friends with that person. I think that's a pretty good indicator of the quality of that friendship, is how balanced it is over time. And there's got to be that sort of give and take. And I think sometimes that can emerge even pretty early on in the process of getting to know somebody.
I think you're right. Like kind of that quintessentially needy kind of person who's just asking for a lot, even if it's just emotional energy from you. I do think you're right. I think a lot of those behaviors can surface pretty early, which is great because then you can see them and decide to change your course a little bit as a result.
Yeah. And what do you think, as we're thinking about this topic of kind of finding your tribe, what do you think is a realistic, I think this is something else that shifts for people going from maybe when they're teenagers or young adults, college age type, to adulthood. Like, what is the realistic sort of size of a friendship tribe? You know,
it's such an interesting question. The reason I think it's interesting right now too is because more than ever we are this like very on the move culture, and so it's likely that, and you were just talking about you're from Pittsburgh, but you went to school here in North Carolina and in Florida, and now you live in a different city in North Carolina, so you have friends in all of those places, and I'm the same way. And so I have close friends who I don't see in person very much at all.
Right.
So there's that kind of like subset of your tribe, and those relationships that are still important to us and that you want to kind of keep as intact as you can, even though they're not here with you physically. Right. And then there's that group that's like part of your community and more of your like, everyday life. I don't know. I do think there are also kind of circles of friends. So you have those most devoted relationships that there are just a handful of those, and people that you really, really have invested in and they've invested in you. But I do think there's a lot of room too for other circles of friends, like just those friends who you maybe don't see them as often for whatever reason. But man, when you guys catch up over lunch, you kind of pick up right where you left off, and you always have really interesting conversations, and she's always gives such good advice about your kids, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of like and almost starting to figure out which category is that person in. And it's not a bad thing if they're in that more outer layer category, I don't think.
Yeah. And that is, I think, one of those shifts that can happen, because I think for a lot of people, when they were kids, they had that one really close best friend or a very small group. Or, you know, at other times they might have been like with a clique or kind of a squad, you know, and everybody's kind of equal friends and they hang out and they do everything together. But the realities of life in adulthood is that, first of all, it can be just even difficult to get a group of people together in a kind of social setting. But also, you know, some people kind of hold on to this thought that, oh, maybe, you know, I was in college, I had this whole sorority group or this big group of girlfriends or other friends or whatever. And then, you know, in adulthood, it's like, well, gosh, I've got like 2 or 3 close friends that are, you know, but then actually that is normal. You know, I think people need to kind of understand expectations around even just the number. Like if you've got like a few really close friends, you're actually, I saw that there was a story in the New York Times that I just came across yesterday. I'm not sure exactly when it posted. We actually posted it yesterday for those who are watching live on our Healthy Relationships Initiative Facebook page. But it really said to really think about investing in like a really core group of like 3 to 5 friends. But I think sometimes that feels like a really small number. You know, it's like, well, I used to have this big crew of people. So I think part of it is kind of adjusting those expectations potentially. And that's not to say that that's the case for everybody, but even research kind of tells us that the average person, if you've got just a real small number of close friends, like actually you're doing pretty good in the friend department.
I totally agree with that. And even if you just look at, I mean, I'm thinking about my Google Calendar. It's full. All of our calendars are full. You know, when we're adults, we're managing work and family and like still trying to keep our hobbies going and these other, you know, pieces that make us feel alive and energized. And you're trying to do all the things that come with being an adult, managing a household and all the food and the cleaning, you know, all these things that just take up our time. And for those of us who are parents, like that's a big priority and it takes up a lot of our time as well. So when you kind of take all of those things and move them aside and look at what time is left, it's not a bunch of time. And so I think to your point, it's like, man, if you have 3 or 4, even 5, like really strong friendships that can fit into this really busy time in our lives, then that's amazing.
Yeah, it is good. And I also really liked, and I wanted to kind of highlight what you had said too about, you know, it's okay to have different kinds of friends. It's also that shift from, you know, having maybe one really close best friend to actually an adulthood friendship might, for some people, look like I've got a great work friend or a few really great work friends that really know what's going on in work. I may not ever hang out with them outside of work, but that's a really important friendship. Or, you know, I might have a good neighbor friend or a good friend through my church or the friend that I work out with at the gym, the friend that, you know, that is the one that you want to go out and hang out and have fun with, and the friend that you want to call when you're going through something. You know, and that's okay, like kind of building up different types of friendships and not feeling like, well, gosh, you know, if one of them isn't my best friend who I call on for every single thing, you know, that then I don't have the right kind of friendships in adulthood. But actually, like those kind of friendships in many ways can be more meaningful as we get into adulthood.
I totally agree. Well, then if you even just think about how we are as people, we're so multifaceted. And so, yeah, like maybe you have this core group that it feels like there's so, like you just kind of get each other and you've invested in each other. But then there's other people, it's like maybe your friend at the gym speaks to this one part of you, and this other friend at work, like, man, she gets you on this other level. And so that's really neat. Like we are complicated, and so having these friendships that can tap into those different layers of ourselves is a neat way to look at it, I think.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it too. So let's shift now to, so we talked a lot about kind of making friends and having right expectations or realistic expectations about what friendship even looks like. But I think that it's one thing to make a friend. It's another thing to keep a friendship strong. And maybe a good starting point is even to say that sometimes friendships come to an end, or they just become not as close as they used to be, and that can be okay. Like that can be very hurtful. It can be a very sad thing, but it also can be a very natural part of friendships over time. So maybe before we even talk about keeping friendships, to say that sometimes a healthy end to a friendship or a healthy, you know, becoming less close over time is part of that process. Do you have any thoughts on what that can look like in a positive way?
Well, yes. First I'll say, though, that was a very difficult concept for me to get okay with, to think, are you kidding me? These people that I was so close with and have invested all this time and energy into, and they know so much about me, and I know about them, and we've spent all this time together, and that could just end potentially forever.
Right.
To go back to the parallels between a friendship and a romantic relationship, I think it's trickier because you think, okay, if I'm dating somebody and we break up, that's it. Like, we've broken up. I mean, of course, there's like nuance within that, but you know, in most cases, like, we break up, we move on. You find somebody else to date.
And there's kind of a script for that,
there
too,
is
right? It's like, I mean, it's part of what I'm going to say is sort of stereotypical, but, you know, it's like you call your friends, you eat ice cream, you sit around being sad, watching sad movies or whatever for a weekend or for however long, and then you kind of start to work on yourself and you get ready. But there's not really a script for friendship,
There's not, and so I think, so this is just me speaking from my own personal experience, but so then I felt very much like I'd failed when I've had friendships come to an end.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I just dug in a whole lot more and pulled in some outside resources, but just kind of thought more about those individually, but then like holistically looking at life in general, and realized, of course, they come to an end sometimes. Because we're people and we change and we grow and conflict arises and sometimes we don't handle that well, and for a whole slew of reasons, they sometimes come to an end, or maybe they almost pause for a while and might resurface again at a different point. I think both of those things are really normal, to your point, and it's like, it feels like a failure to say, oh my goodness, we used to be so close and now we're not friends anymore, but I think everybody has those stories.
I think so too, and I think part of it is acknowledging that it can be sad, you know, grieving, it's a loss, it can be a real loss, and taking the time to grieve that. Sometimes I think it can help to have an open conversation with a friend and say, you know, I'm real sorry, we've kind of reached this point in our friendship, it seems like we're not going to be able to be as close anymore. Obviously, a lot of times it's more probably in the dating terminology, like the ghosting, you know, people just kind of grow apart. And then I don't think there's any set rules for it, but I do think it is helpful to take some time to, just like most people probably would try to do, or hopefully they try to do after a breakup of a romantic relationship, reflect on that. Think, okay, well, what happened here? Was it just two friends growing apart, or, you know, was there something that came up in our relationship? Did we not handle conflict? You know, to kind of take time to learn from that. But, you know, but I agree with you. It's a very hard, that is a kind of a hard reality in adulthood that can be very difficult to say, you know, sometimes, and actually it happens with kids too. I know with my own kids, sometimes, you know, they've had situations where a friendship has become not healthy anymore, and they've had to kind of put boundaries around it, either put a pause on it or to kind of remove themselves from a friendship if it wasn't a positive relationship for them anymore. So I think, I'm glad we touched on it. I don't want to spend too much time on that because we're trying to talk about making friends, but I think sometimes it is helpful to acknowledge and understand that it doesn't mean that you're a failure. Like you said, it doesn't mean, you might feel like, gosh, I failed here, like there must be something wrong with me. That's a natural part of relationships, and especially in today's day and age where people move around all the time and in and out and we're so busy, like actually a lot of friendships probably do reach that point. But to bring it back to the idea of how do we keep friendships strong. So especially, I mean, we do live in this time of just insane busyness. Like everyone's busy. How are you? I'm busy. You know, that's like our normal kind of way of being now, is just being busy. And in many ways, I think especially like if you're a parent, you have to meet the needs of your child. Like that is your job as a parent. Your job, if you are not fulfilling your responsibilities at work, you might not keep your job, or you might not get paid from your job. Your marriage or your couple relationship, often there's a lot more. So I think in many ways, friendships often go to the bottom of the priority list for a lot of people. So what are your thoughts on some things that people can do to keep their friendship strong, even in the context of like really busy lives?
Yeah, I think the key is scheduling. And again, going back to that word intentionality, and this might be a shift for people, especially if you're coming from that, like, oh my gosh, like I had all these friends in college and we just hung out. It was great. And you could do everything last minute. So maybe you have historically been a more spontaneous or last minute person. in my experience, that doesn't work very well when you're trying to have an ongoing, like, strong, consistent adult friendship. It just doesn't, because everyone's busy, and so you picking up the phone or shooting somebody a text and being like, let's go see a movie right now, they're not going to be free.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. So think about that in advance. And it's funny because it's like people say to do the same thing in a marriage, right? So like, schedule out times for you, and everyone's like, oh, it takes the romance out of it. But I don't think it does.
Yeah.
I think it's showing that that's what your priority is. And so in doing the same thing with friendship and saying like, okay, I even like to, and so this is like totally showing my type A and whatever, but I like to keep a list of friends and almost like look at the upcoming weeks and months and think like, who have I not spent time with in a while, and how might I be able to reach out and see if I can schedule some time, and doing that and seeing if somebody wants to grab lunch, or if, you know, if they don't live here, if we can schedule a phone call to catch up or whatever it is, but like doing that scheduling, and because then it'll happen.
Yeah.
You can't just rely on having to run into each other at Starbucks and sit and have an hour to chat and catch up.
That's a really smart idea. I think that is a lot of people probably wouldn't think to do that, but actually to keep a list of the people who are important to you outside of the people that you are going to see all the time, like maybe your spouse and your children, but to really, and then revisit that list and say, you know, maybe realistically, maybe it's one person on that list, or maybe it's one get together and one phone call in a month. Is it really reflects the time. And I think too, like there's one group of friends that I have that we go out to dinner and we literally start planning like 3 months in advance. We're like, okay, we know we're going to be due for our, you know, fall get together, but it takes us 3 months to schedule it, so let's go ahead and get something scheduled.
Yeah.
It may not be scheduled for a few months down the road, but that we know that it's there and we're making that a priority to get together.
I think so, for
sure. I agree with you. I think a lot of people maybe view that as like, oh, it's too complicated to do that, or it's not spontaneous enough. But realistically, if you're a busy person and you've got a lot of demands on your time, that's what it takes to stay connected to people.
It does. Well, and then thinking too, and this is like, and so I think too it's the balance, because for a lot of friendships, it's like you want to have that one-on-one time to really connect. But I do think that there are opportunities to keep friendships going that involve groups or group things. So it's like, okay, I can include more people. So maybe you host a dinner party and invite groups of friends who maybe don't know each other. Because to our point earlier, like you have all these different friends. Maybe they don't know each other, but you're like, but I know they would love each other for whatever reason. And so maybe you invite 3 other couples over and have this event together. And so that's a way to kind of like mix things up a little bit, see a lot of friends at once, but also help kind of forge new and different connections in the process.
Yeah, and look for other opportunities to do that. I know this is fresh in my mind because one of my children just had his birthday, so we just had his birthday party. I mean, you know, sometimes around parties, I don't know that it was this time, but I know sometimes they'll be like, why did you invite this person? Like, I'm not friends with that kid. I'm like, well, I'm friends with Karen, and I'm the one that's throwing this party, you know, and so sometimes it is kind of saying like, okay, I've got this thing that's built in, or that I'm already doing, like maybe I could invite these people, and maybe they don't fit with the other people that are there, but it's that opportunity. And if you're cautious or careful, I think if you're bringing people together who don't know each other, like there's things that you can do to help them feel connected and just, you know, kind of smooth that out a little bit. But it is hard. I mean, realistically, it's easier if you try to organize group events or some sort of group outing or group activity or something versus trying to say, okay, I need dedicated time with person A, person B, person C. Like that's very difficult in the context of a busy schedule.
It is difficult, yeah. And to your point, like I wrote a blog post a few months ago about what I kind of call the not right now things in my life, because I was realizing there are so many things that I want to be doing, and some of that involves like friendships that I want to be investing in, and it comes to a point where it's not feasible for all of them to fit right now. And it helped me to kind of acknowledge that and say like, okay, I'm almost like physically moving this thing to this different bucket for now, which doesn't mean I'm throwing it away. It doesn't mean it's gone forever, but it means it just can't be a priority right now. And so I think like we were talking about pausing some friendships, and unfortunately we reached super busy points in our lives where it's like, they're just not all going to fit. It doesn't mean they have to go away. It doesn't mean you can't still stay connected on social media and check in every now and then, but you're just not going to be able to give them the time that they deserve.
That's right.
And so knowing that, acknowledging that, kind of coming to terms with that, and then saying, but you know what, like I want to come to a point where I have a little more space and I can kind of pull those friendships back out again. So
yeah, that is such a great point. And I know for me in my life, that's given me a lot of peace. And sometimes I'm like, wish I could do this, 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 and this. And then it's like, but I have no time. And if I add one more thing to my schedule, I'm going to completely be overwhelmed. So keeping that, I don't have it written down on a list. It's a great idea. I think I'm going to make my own not right now list. But I do have certain things that I'll just kind of remind myself, like, you know, at this phase in my life, that's just not something that's happening. But that doesn't mean that once my kids go off to college, or once I, you know, hit a different point in my career, or, you know, maybe it's for me, you know, with the kids, it's like in the summertime, you know, like that's the time. Maybe we can't do something right now. But I think that does give a lot of peace around friendships. And it might even just be, again, kind of looking at that. Maybe it's a pretty short list. Maybe even to take your idea of like a list of people you want to check in with, it's sort of like, you know, having groups of people on certain levels of the list. It's like, okay, this person, like, I really want to see this person or be in touch with this person like once a week. And this other person, it might be every few months. And that's okay. And it could be where people live, or, you know, just kind of really being realistic, getting a realistic sense of how often you might be able to connect and what those connections might look like. I'll also say, too, I think, like, really using, in terms of kind of along the same lines of the keeping friendships strong, but using social media, again, as a tool here, or even technology. But one of the things that I've started doing is trying to, like, if I know, I mean, I'm not perfect about this. There's a lot of opportunities I'm trying this. But if I know somebody has a job interview, or like next week I have a friend who's going to be commemorating a significant loss in her life, like I'll write that on my calendar so that I do not forget, you know, to check in with that friend. And again, some ways I feel, personally I have to be like, well, I wish I would just remember it all automatically on my own, but just realistically, I know that I could easily get to the end of a day or a week and be like, oh my gosh, I forgot to, you know, text my friend or my sister or whatever and say, hope that job interview goes well. You know, so thinking of ways to really use technology to your advantage, not only relying on it, because of course the in-person or on the phone conversations mean a lot more than a text message or posting or commenting on somebody's Facebook page. But really, those are things that can help.
I totally agree. And again, like, super type A, but I love that. And so having, like, my friends' birthdays, my friends' children's birthdays, losses, things like that. Like, I had a miscarriage. It'll be 4 years ago this December, and there's a friend of mine who emails me every year on the day that we found out. And it's just, like, it's the kind of thing every single year. And we're not that close. Like, she's more in that outer circle of friends, but man, it means a lot for her to remember that. And I'm guessing, unless her memory is much better than mine, and because she has it jotted down somewhere. So I don't think it takes away from.
You're not thinking like, oh, she just has this on her calendar. Like, wow, did she really remember this? And she reached out on a day that might be difficult.
Right. So
we say that a lot in the Healthy Relationships Initiative, that often it's really the small things that people put into relationships that have a really big impact. So it might be you're in a really busy season of life and you can't spend, you know, 3 hours a week with that really close friend of yours, but you can send them a quick text message and say, you know, hey, I was just thinking about you, or just wanted to check in and see how this event was, or, you know, or whatever it might be. And those are ways that can kind of keep things really strong in between the opportunities for the bigger connection.
Absolutely. Well, I would also say, and this kind of comes back to that place of this busy, kind of like always on culture that we're in, to really try to be as present as you can during those times that you do have with your friends, because, man, it can be so easy, like, to check your phone and what am I going to do next after we get coffee or whatever, but just as much as you can, try to be really present with that person in whatever time period you have together, because I think that helps you both pull so much more meaning and significance out of that time, however short it might be.
Yeah, definitely. Before we move on, I want to see if we have any questions from Camilla.
Sure, we do. So adult friendships, as we've discussed, can be especially challenging. But for those who've dealt with trauma and abuse, it can feel a little bit different trying to make new friends. How should survivors approach friendship when a lack of trust could be an issue?
Good question. Do you have any thoughts to that? Or?
I would say, well, kind of going back to that red flag thing that we were talking about, trying to pick up on those red flags, listen to your gut a lot, I would say. I think that tends to give you a pretty good sense of whether somebody's somebody that you might want to trust and feel able to trust.
Yeah.
And then maybe taking it a little bit slow. So I think you can develop really good friendships without having to feel like you're giving a lot of yourself to somebody emotionally or giving them more information than you think feels comfortable for you.
Yep.
So those are the first things that come to mind. And then my dad says this all the time, and I love this phrase. He says you have to waste a lot of time with someone to become friends. And so, and I think you can apply that in a lot of different ways, but in this case, it's like, think about some activities that you can do together to start to build a friendship, because that way you're developing shared experiences.
Right.
So go on a hike, go try something new, like whatever it is, and then you can center that around the activity you're doing and talk a lot about that and maybe enjoy that together, and it helps you move a little bit more slowly into the place of feeling like you're really having to open up in a way that might make you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And just be careful who you share that story with or whatever that trauma is. And I think that really speaks to that point about moving slowly. And I love the idea of kind of building in some activities or other things, so it's not necessarily always just sitting around and talking, which it can probably lead people to sharing quickly. And not to say that you shouldn't trust people who are new in your life, but especially if you've got some sort of really difficult or traumatic or potentially embarrassing experiences, you want to be careful who you share those experiences with before. Make sure you get to know them, that they're not the kind of person that's going to go gossip or speak badly about you. And I would say kind of relatedly too, to kind of add to one more piece to the things that you said, is like during that process, especially if you're moving slower in friendships, have other sources of support or other ways of coping, so it doesn't lead you to get maybe too dependent on a friend. So that might look like having a counselor that you go and talk to, or journaling, or maybe it's another family member or something like that that you could speak with about things, so that you're not sort of put in a position where you're maybe tempted to overshare to a point where before the trust has really been built.
I think that's great. Well, and if you had another friend or family member too that could also meet this person and kind of help you just like say, oh, I really do get a good vibe from them, or if they have some potential red flags that they're seeing too, as they back up. But I love that. Yeah,
that's tricky too. And I would add, this question didn't specify what kind of trauma or abuse it is, and that could be related. It could be some sort of traumatic experience in the context of a friendship. And if that's the case, I do think, while we just said, maybe not sharing your whole story and everything that's ever happened to you very early on before you have trust built, like, it's okay, I think, to be open and say, I've been hurt in some friendships recently, and I'm a little bit guarded, but I want, I'm kind of going back to your point earlier about being more direct and say, but I like, the friendship that we've started to build, and I hope we can continue to build. If ever I seem a little guarded, then you can kind of know that I'm recently coming off of a very difficult experience.
Yeah, I love that. It's allowing you to be a little bit vulnerable, but in a way that hopefully feels kind of okay.
Right.
And also gives the other person the opportunity to connect, I think, more early on.
Yeah, exactly. But don't give up too, because I think that is something that sometimes people, especially who have traumatic experiences, really can. It's almost, you can reach a point, if you've had a lot of difficult experiences in relationships, you can reach a point for some people where it's like, it's just easier to be alone. I would rather, I want to keep people at a distance. I don't want to let anybody in. But, our last sort of topic before we wrap up is just the value of friendship for adults. And it's hard. There are a lot of challenges, making friends, keeping friends, sometimes losing friends, sometimes being hurt in friendships. But overall, what are some of your thoughts on just sort of why it's so important to have those friendships in adulthood?
Well, it's funny, I even jotted down some documented wellness and health reasons for having friends, and one of them is around trauma. It says that strong friendships give us a better ability to cope with trauma, and I think that can refer to past trauma, but also, of course, things that come up over the course of the friendship, and then you have people who can jump right in. I think, so I mentioned that we had a miscarriage a few years ago, and I will never forget, this just meant the entire world. We went to the doctor, found out we lost the baby. Our doctor's office was maybe 6 minutes from our house, really close to home. While we were there, we had a handful of friends who knew what might happen at this point. Yeah. So I can't remember if I did it or if my husband did, but we just like texted a few friends. No, it wasn't even that. I texted a friend and asked if she could bring my laptop home from work because I'd be working from home that day. And before we even got home from our 6-minute drive, 4 friends had come to our house. Wow. And were just there waiting for us. And it was definitely a traumatic experience, but having them there was huge in dealing with that trauma. Yeah. So, and we had other friends show up in non-physical ways too, but that meant so much. And so that's one ability to cope more easily with trauma, improved happiness, self-confidence, and increased sense of belonging and purpose. So even if you're just looking at it from a like, how can I be the healthiest version of a human standpoint? Right. Have friends and keep those relationships going. That's one of the important things, because I do think, to your point earlier, it's easy to push them to the back burner. And as parents, we start to prioritize maybe our children's friendships and relationships. Right. And so then it's like, well, yes, that's important, but yours are also really important too. Yeah. So here are some of those reasons. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that's, I like how you kind of hit the points on a lot of different levels. Like, it's important because you never know what kind of difficult times are going to be coming in life. And I mean, I would totally agree with you. When I've gone through difficult times in my life, I do not know how I could have made it through without my friends and my family standing by my side. And, you know, but even beyond that, it just enriches your life to have those friendships. One of the things that I really value in adulthood friendships, kind of compared to, I think when I was younger, it was about having those friends that were like just like me. But I actually really love in adulthood, I think you have a lot more freedom to have a lot of different kinds of friends, and that you get such different perspectives, and you know, it adds a lot of richness to your life to have those kinds of connections too. And I think you're absolutely right, just the importance of we're busy, there's so many things, there's so many demands on our time that it's easy to kind of let friendships fall to the wayside, but it's so important to make the time and make the effort to invest into those friendships, because it adds a lot into your life. It helps you to add a lot and contribute a lot to other people's lives as well. And for those who are parents, or you know, even not parents themselves, but have other young people in their lives, it's healthy to model that for your kids too, to say, you know, it's not all about you, children. I know you think it's all about you, but it's not always just about you. That, you know, my friendships and my relationships and my health and my well-being are really important too.
Absolutely. And then I think another layer of that for your children is to introduce other strong adults into their lives. That's right. So I think about like my parents' close friends and how those people were important in my life too as their children. So it can kind of, that can become a really special piece of that relationship too.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that's so true in terms of the value of having those sort of other connections. So we've just got a couple minutes left to go. So what are your kind of final thoughts, or the things that you hope that people who've been listening to this program will take away?
I hope the first one would be going back to what we opened with, which is if you feel like you've ever struggled with friendship in adulthood, welcome to the club. Right. It's a very normal thing. And so, and I think that it's probably something that's very universal. So if you feel like you're struggling with it, other people around you probably are too. So what can you do to be a little bit brave, take some of the initiative, and like we talked about doing new experiences, but I think another good exercise is look around your daily life, your routine. Like maybe you go to the same coffee shop all the time, but you never really look around because you're just on a mission. And I think if you start to pay a little bit more attention to the people around you in a whole bunch of different scenarios, you might start to see some potential friendships emerge in those situations. Yeah. So just kind of keeping an open mind as it relates to making friends, and then remembering the importance of investing in existing friendships, even when life feels so crazy, you have no idea how you're going to squeeze it in.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's great. I totally think you hit the right main kind of closing thoughts about just knowing that it is such a kind of an uncomfortable topic to acknowledge that it's like, damn, because I think if we go back to even just this whole concept of thinking like it's embarrassing to struggle with making friends, because it makes you feel like, well, there must be something wrong with me, you know. But really, it's just a natural part of adulthood. Friendships really change and evolve over time. But sometimes you need to step out of your comfort zone just a little bit to kind of try to build on relationships that are there, make new connections, and then also that it does take a lot of effort and intentionality to keep those relationships strong. That it's really worth it. The time that you invest in your friendships is definitely, sometimes they don't always work out as great as you hope, but that overall, having a strong network of friends, just like the benefits you mentioned, is just so important for your overall health and well-being in life. So thank you so much. This has been such a great and interesting discussion. I think we've talked a lot about really good kind of big picture things for people to keep in mind, as well as a lot of really useful practical tools. So thanks so much, Anna.
Thanks so much, Karen.
Thank you. And thanks to those of you who've been listening. We hope that this information that we've talked about has been really helpful in terms of building healthier friendships specifically in your life. We do welcome your feedback, and Camilla posted the link to our feedback forum in the chat room. And we hope that you'll join us for our next relationship booster, which will be Friday, December 6th. And our topic for that one is going to be about blended families. And that's actually our last one for 2019. And then we'll start back up every first and third Friday in January. So thanks so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you again soon.